The wind howled down the mountains like a dying wolf, dragging snow and sorrow behind it. Elijah Cutter stood at the edge of a ridge, his rifle slung low and his face carved from the same stone as the peaks surrounding him. Below, the valley was wrapped in white, silent, cold, and empty, just like his heart since that night 3 winters ago. They'd come in the dark, 5 riders with masks and whiskey breath, torch flames dancing like devils in the black. Elijah had been out hunting elk, his traps full from the early snow. When he returned, the cabin he'd built with his own 2 hands was nothing but ash. His wife, Clara, and their baby girl, Rose, were buried in the embers. Sheriff claimed it was bandits, maybe Utes. But Elijah knew better. The silver ring taken from Clara's finger, the way the place was torched clean, this was no random raid. He left town that night, packed what was left, burned the sheriff's lie right out of his heart and headed into the Bitterroots. Folks said he'd gone mad with grief, became a ghost of the mountains. And maybe they were right. The only thing keeping him breathing was the dream of justice, or revenge. Whatever came first. It was a bitter January morning when he found her. Elijah was tracking a wounded buck across the northern slope, snow crunching beneath his boots, when he saw the shape, a dark smear in the white. At first he thought it was a bear, curled up and frozen, but as he got closer he saw the skirt. Torn, blood-stained. The woman lay crumpled against a boulder, face half buried in the snow, skin pale as moonlight. She wasn't breathing. Or so, he thought. A soft sound, barely a whisper, escaped her lips as he leaned down. Her eyes fluttered open, 2 pale blue flames flickering in the cold. "Please, don't let him find me," she rasped. Elijah didn't ask questions. He scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how close to death. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but it was still breath. That was enough. He carried her through the storm, back to his lean-to cabin beneath the ridgeline. He laid her by the fire, wrapped her in buffalo hides, and fed her hot broth with hands rough from years of solitude. For 3 days, she drifted between fever and dreams, muttering strange names. Bishop, Jonah, the cross. Once, she gripped Elijah's wrist and gasped, "They killed him. They'll kill me too." He stayed by her side, stoking the fire, keeping death at bay as best he could. On the 4th day, her fever broke. She sat up slow, wincing as pain flared across her ribs. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Safe. For now," Elijah said, pouring her water. "Name's Elijah Cutter. You?" The woman hesitated, eyes darting to the frost-rimmed window. Then, quiet as snowfall, she said, Margaret Delaney." He recognized the name. Everyone in the territories had heard it by now. A runaway bride from back east, supposedly kidnapped, maybe dead. Her betrothed, a railroad baron named Jonah Bishop, richer than sin, crueler than most devils. Rumor was she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. Something about land deeds and buried bodies. "What happened to you?" Elijah asked, voice low. Margaret's lips trembled. "I saw him. What he did to that family on the reservation. He thought I'd be too scared to speak. But I ran. Been running for weeks. Thought I'd die out there." Elijah's jaw clenched. A railroad man with blood on his hands. That explained the riders, the fear in her eyes, and the price on her head. He stood and stoked the fire, eyes lost in the flames. "Don't reckon you'll be safe long," he said. "Not with bishops. Kind hunting you." Margaret met his gaze. "I didn't mean to bring trouble, Mr. Cutter. I just didn't want to die with the truth buried beside me." Elijah turned, the firelight casting shadows across his weathered face. "Neither did my wife." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Trouble was coming. But for the first time in years, Elijah didn't feel alone. He had a name, a target, and a reason to ride again. By dawn, the snow had stopped, but the silence that followed was thicker than any blizzard. The kind of silence that meant watching eyes, coiled tension, and death not far behind. Elijah stepped outside the cabin, boots crunching in the hard frost. The mountains around him were ghost quiet, but his gut stirred like it used to in the war, right before bullets flew. He knelt beside a drift near the trail and cursed under his breath. Fresh tracks, 4 horses, heavy riders, too fresh for trappers. They'd found her trail. Inside, Margaret was awake, her long hair still damp from the fever. She sat wrapped in fur, eyes following him with something between fear and determination. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked. He nodded. "Half day out, maybe less." "I shouldn't have come here," she said. "You'll die because of me." "I already died, Miss Delaney, just didn't have the good sense to lay down." She didn't speak after that, just looked at him with eyes full of ghosts. Elijah packed what they needed: cartridges, pemmican, 2 bedrolls, and doused the fire. The cabin had done its duty. Now it would only draw fire. They rode hard, south through a narrow pass choked with fallen trees and boulders. Margaret rode Elijah's mule, a stubborn beast named Ash, while he took point on his stallion, Flint. With every crunch of snow behind them, Elijah listened, rifle across his lap, hand never far from the Colt on his hip. As they rode, Margaret opened up in pieces like pages torn from a cursed Bible. "I saw him cut that man's throat," she said one evening as they camped beneath an overhang. "A Lakota father. Said he was trespassing on Bishop's survey land. But the man had his wife and daughter with him. They watched him die like livestock." Elijah stirred the fire, the flames casting orange shadows on his face. "The law won't touch Bishop." "No," Margaret agreed, "but I've got names, documents. I hid them near a relay station north of Red Clay Ridge. Jonah doesn't. No, I made copies." "You aiming to bring him down?" "I'm aiming to end this, one way or another." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then we ride to Red Clay." They moved at night, cut across frozen creeks and through pine thickets so thick you could hear your heartbeat echo. Twice Elijah caught signs of riders closing, ashes still warm, hoofprints in tight formation. Whoever Bishop sent was trained, ruthless, and close. They reached Red Clay Ridge 3 nights later, cold to the bone and near starved. The relay station stood abandoned, a squat timber post half buried in snow. Inside, Margaret peeled up the floorboards behind the old stove and pulled out a wax-sealed packet. "This is it," she said. "Evidence of everything. Murders, land theft, even bribes to the circuit judge." Elijah took the bundle and slipped it into his coat. "Then let's put it in the right hands." But as they turned to leave, Flint whinnied, nervous. Then they heard it. The sound of boots, spurs. 6 men stepped from the tree line, rifles in hand, faces hidden beneath dusters and scarves. The one in the middle pulled off his hat and grinned. "Elijah Cutter," he drawled. "Didn't think I'd see the wild ghost himself." Elijah stepped forward, thumb brushing his Colt. "You boys aiming to talk or die trying?" The leader shrugged. "Name's Clay Dorn. Bishop sent us to collect his bride and clean up the mess." He looked Margaret up and down like she was a piece of meat gone to rot. "She belongs to the Bishop now." Elijah spat into the snow. "No one belongs to men like Bishop." Clay smiled wider. "Then I reckon we'll take her off your corpse." It happened fast. Clay reached for his pistol, but Elijah was faster. A single shot rang out, tearing through Clay's shoulder, sending him spinning. Margaret dove for cover as the others opened fire. Elijah rolled behind a stump, bullets whizzing past his ears. He picked them off one by one, patient and cold, just like he'd done in the war. By the time the smoke cleared, 4 men were dead, 1 wounded, and the last, Clay, was crawling through the snow. Elijah stepped over him, gun leveled. "You tell Bishop," Elijah said, voice hard as iron. "We're coming for him next." Then he let Clay live. Because fear spreads faster than blood. They burned the bodies that night, Margaret wept, not for the dead, but for what was coming. She knew what Bishop would do. He'd raise hell and send devils to hunt them down. But Elijah, Cutter didn't flinch. He finally had a purpose. The road into Bishop's Crossing was paved with fear and iron. A rail town built on stolen land and crushed bones, it rose from the red clay like a wound that refused to heal. The buildings were tall, proud, and crooked, like the man who owned them. At the town's heart stood the Bishop Hotel, 3 stories of black timber and ambition, guarded day and night by hired guns in long coats. Elijah Cutter stared down at it from the bluffs, spyglass in hand. Next to him, Margaret knelt, in the snow, her fingers trembling not from cold but from what lay ahead. "That's him," she whispered. "He's down there, top floor. He never leaves unless it's by train, and that don't come for another day." "Good," Elijah said, lowering the glass. "Then we've got time to make him feel what he's done." Margaret clutched her satchel, the papers inside it, the names, the deeds, the proof. "If we get this to the telegraph office, I can send it to the papers in Cheyenne. Federal marshals will come." "Maybe," Elijah said, cinching his saddle tight. "But marshals come slow, bullets move faster." They rode into town under dusk's veil, cloaked in the quiet menace of falling snow. Elijah had washed the mountain off himself, trimmed his beard, cleaned his rifle. He looked less ghost, more gunslinger now. Margaret wore a cloak pulled tight, her face shadowed. No one paid them mind. Travelers were common on the railroad's edge. But eyes watched from alleyways, men who smelled blood like wolves. They went first to the telegraph station. Margaret handed the packet to an old operator who recognized her and nearly dropped his pipe. "Miss Delaney, Lord Almighty, we thought you were—" "Send this," she said, voice sharp. "All of it. To Judge Abernathy in Cheyenne. Now." The man obeyed, fingers flying over keys. The message clacked out like a death knell. Then Elijah turned to her. "You still got that Derringer I gave you?" She nodded. "Loaded and ready." "Then stay low." He walked out into the street, slow and steady, boots loud on the boardwalk. The Bishop Hotel loomed ahead, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Elijah pushed through the saloon doors. Inside, warmth and noise. Laughter, cards, the clink of glasses. The piano fell silent as the room turned. A few recognized him. Others just knew the look, trouble with a trigger finger. Behind the bar stood a bald man with a silver vest and cold eyes. "You lost, friend?" Elijah didn't answer, just said, "Tell Jonah Bishop the mountains come down." The bartender reached for the shotgun under the counter. He never made it. Elijah's Colt roared. Wood splintered. Screams. He moved like a ghost, 2 more shots, 2 men down. He didn't fire to kill unless he had to. But tonight he had to. By the time he reached the stairs, the hotel was chaos. Gunmen spilled from rooms above. Elijah dove behind a barrel, reloading quick as breath. One by one he dropped them, each shot precise, fueled by grief and fire. Upstairs, Margaret slipped in through the kitchen and crept toward the back stairs. She moved like smoke, clutching the small pistol in her hand. Every footstep reminded her of Clara Cutter and Baby Rose, names she'd never known until Elijah told her. She reached the 3rd floor and found the door with the brass plate, J.B. Inside, Bishop sat in a velvet chair, sipping brandy like the day world belonged to him. His eyes narrowed as she entered. "Well, there she is," he said smoothly, "the runaway bride. You cost me a fortune, darling." "I saw what you did," she said, voice shaking but steady. "I sent proof. They're coming for you." Bishop laughed. "They'll come for you first. You and that mountain savage." He stood, reaching into his coat, but Margaret was faster. The Derringer cracked. Smoke filled the room. Bishop staggered back, hand clutching his side. But he didn't fall. "You think that's enough to kill me, girl?" "No," said a voice from the door. "But this is." Elijah stood there, rifle raised. For a second, he saw fire again. The burning cabin, Clara's scream, Rose's silence. Then he pulled the trigger. The bullet took Jonah Bishop clean through the chest, and he dropped like a felled tree. Silence swallowed the room. Margaret sank to her knees, breath ragged. Elijah knelt beside her, gripping her shoulder. "It's done," he said. But outside, the town wasn't quiet. More gunmen were coming, more blood to spill. They stood together back to back as boots thundered up the stairs. Gunfire tore through the hallway. Elijah dragged a heavy oak table in front of the door, flipped it, and dropped behind just as bullets splintered the frame. Margaret crouched beside him, reloading her derringer with shaking hands. "We won't make it out of here," she said. Elijah glanced at her, calm despite the chaos. "Don't need to. Just need to last long enough." "Long enough for what?" He didn't answer. Just passed her an extra revolver and leaned around the table to fire. 2 gunmen dropped in the hall. More shouts echoed from below. Margaret covered her ears as a shotgun roared, sending shards of plaster raining down. Elijah winced, blood trailing from his shoulder where buckshot had grazed him. The floor trembled. Then, beneath the gunfire, a new sound, whistles, hooves, voices shouting orders. It wasn't Bishop's men. It was the law. Through the haze of smoke, Elijah saw the star-shaped badge gleaming on a coat. Federal marshals, dozens of them, flooding the saloon with rifles drawn, barking warnings. The wire Margaret sent had reached Cheyenne, and they'd come. The rest unfolded in moments. Bishop's men threw down their weapons or died trying. Those who survived were shackled and dragged into the cold street. Elijah stood at the top of the stairs, bloodied, rifle in hand, Margaret beside him. When the marshals saw him, they hesitated, like they were staring at a legend from the war. One stepped forward, an older man with a weathered face. "You Elijah Cutter?" "I was." "We got your wire," the marshal said to Margaret. "Name's Whitaker. You two did the territory a favor. Bishop's empire ends today." Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Whitaker tipped his hat to Elijah. "We'll take it from here." They walked out into the falling snow as the last of Bishop's hired guns were loaded onto wagons. Townsfolk peeked from behind shutters, murmuring, whispering tales that would soon become legend. At the edge of Bishop's Crossing, Margaret turned to Elijah. "You could stay," she said softly. "They'll need witnesses, someone to testify." Elijah looked out at the mountains, those cold peaks that had hidden him all those years. "I came for justice, not a badge." Margaret reached into her coat and handed him a small, sealed envelope. "There's a deed in here. Land up north. Safe? Quiet, it's yours if you want it." He took it, tucking it away without a word. They stood there in the snow, neither knowing what to say. Finally, Margaret asked, "What will you do now?" Elijah turned toward the open trail. "Bury the dead. Build something for the living." She smiled, sad but strong. "Maybe I'll see you again." He tipped his hat. "Maybe." Then he turned and rode. 1 month later, Montana Territory. The wind still howled in the high country, but there was warmth in it now, like a breath drawn from the ashes. Elijah Cutter stood beside a new cabin, smaller than the one he lost but made with care. Smoke rose from the chimney. His rifle leaned by the door, gathering dust. He walked the ridge each morning, same as before, but now with eyes clear of ghosts. The past was still there, but no longer owned him. In the valley below, spring was coming, and with it peace.